Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. And welcome to episode 17 of Smallville, the saviour of Superman, coming to you a bit later than usual. Sorry about that. Had a long shopping shift to go. I went shopping, basically. Never go shopping with a woman. Anyway, I'm back. So welcome to episode 17 of Smallville, the Saviour of Superman. And today we're going to talk about the season 6 episode, Nemesis, where Lex and Clark are stuck under some tunnels together. Because what basically happens is Lex is he's doing these human cloning experiments under these tunnels, and Lionel finds out about it. But this woman who Lex is actually using for the cloning, he's actually turned her husband into a super soldier. She wants the truth from Lex, so she blows the caves up. So he's trapped with her in it, and she wants a confession from him. So Lionel begs Clark to go down there and save Lex. Now the problem is there's kryptonite, full of kryptonite. When the meteors hit, both times, the season 1 meteors and the season 4 meteors, basically they hit those tunnels. So there's a lot of kryptonite down there. So Clark hasn't got his power. And there's this great moment when Clark's trapped because he's weakened by the kryptonite, and you don't really know what Lex is going to do. Well, it's obvious he's going to save him, but there is a bit of mystery and tension there. And it's brilliant. And obviously it's called Nemesis, so they use that to their advantage. And Lex goes to him somewhere along the way. You change your mind from thinking I was your friend to you thinking I was your nemesis. But this episode is why Smallville is a great example of how Smallville earned everything that it did. Smallville isn't Arrow, isn't Supergirl, it isn't ready-made heroes, right? I thought Arrow was really good because they gave Oliver Queen this great kind of origin. They really used him being stuck on the island in a fantastic fashion. They kind of took the backflashes that Lost did and really created a powerful emotional kind of thing there. I think The Flash was really good the way they did him as well. I think slowly those shows didn't have any emotional baggage. And that's the one thing you can't accuse Smallville of. Smallville built up their characters slowly and built up their pre-Superman story from the pilot. And as I say, the first season was a slow burn, but they developed those characters. So slowly, Lex and Clark are friends via season 1, 2, most of 3. Then the worm begins to turn. And this episode, Nemesis, really is a reward to the fans for watching that. I don't really think you could do a show like Smallville now unless you were on HBO, where it's a slow burn, you're developing it slowly. I mean, Smallville was always exciting. You had the superhero action, but the emotional character dynamics were just as awesome and as epic as the superhero CGI moments. That's why Smallville is so unique. So this episode, Nemesis, is so earned in so many ways. They're stuck there on their own, so they have it out verbally, and it's emotional and it's amazing. And this is a beautiful moment at the end of the episode because this is what Superman is. And this is what Clark Kent is when he's talking to his mother about Lex. And, she says, look, just because I'm friends with Lionel doesn't mean I trust him. And then that's when Clark says, well, maybe I've misjudged Lex. And she goes, Clark, your only weakness isn't kryptonite. It's your need to be able to forgive people, to be able to trust people. That might be your biggest weakness of all. And I want to cry when I see this. When I first saw this and when I on rewatch, because he wants to believe in Lex. He does. He wants to continue that friendship, but he can't. The audience know that. Even Martha knows that. Everybody knows that. Even Chloe's warned him. Everyone's warned him. But he won't back away from that relationship. And it's difficult for him in season 6 because Lex and Lana are together. Lex got with Lana to kind of hurt Clark in a way. I mean, Lex does love Lana in his own twisted way. But part of the kind of interest for Lex was he's obsessed with Clark. He wanted to have what Clark had. He wanted the parents. He admitted it in the season 5 finale when he becomes Zod. He wants the parents. He wants to live on the farm. He wants the love. He wants he wants the lifestyle where people don't question him. And it's amazing. I love it in a way because in Lex's final episode as a full-time character in Arctic, and he says, "I love you like a brother." He does. This is something that's so different to the comics. He loves Clark. He adores Clark. He's also obsessed with Clark. But he does care about Clark. And I think if we go to Arctic and he goes, "I could have helped you become a hero," Lex genuinely believes that. He wants to stand with Clark. But even Lex knows ultimately when he tries to control him in the fortress at the end of season 7, he knows that's not possible. And at that moment, he just sees Clark as a threat that has to be vanquished. But in Nemesis, it's really different because obviously Lex is still suspicious of Clark, that he's different to everyone else. He's tried to prove it for years. But again, he's in this situation, just like in season 1 when Clark loses his powers and, he sees he's got a nosebleed and he's freaked out because his experts have told him in season 1, there's no way you could have knocked Clark over. Something else happened here. So Lex is not stupid. He trusts his experts. So that doubt goes on no matter how Clark's been able to wriggle out of the fact that he's not a human being. And Nemesis is very interesting in the sense that Lex doesn't want to kill Clark. You see, the Lex Luthor in the comics, the Lex Luthor, even in the films, I think, will be quite happy to kill Superman, make him suffer. I mean, Eisenberg's Luthor really wanted to make him suffer. He wanted the world to see him as a fraud and then kill him. That's why he creates Doomsday. But this Lex Luthor is different. There is this relationship. I remember in season 2 when there was a question of maybe Clark and Lex being brothers. That made Lex so happy. And, it's so emotional to see the way they did Lex Luthor. And this is the uniqueness of this show. Lex Luthor does not hate Clark Kent in this world. And even when Clark becomes Superman, if you ever read the Smallville season 11 comic, he kind of goes up to Clark because Tess has kind of wiped his brain before he killed her. And so he doesn't remember that he shared a friendship with Clark. So he says to Clark when he bumps into him on the way to the Daily Planet one day, Clark's on his way to work, and he says to him, "People tell me that we used to be friends in Smallville." And that's amazing. And he says to Clark, "I find it hard to believe that me and you were ever friends." So just amazing. So what they created was amazing. This is not the Lex Luthor who hates Clark Kent. He may hate Superman. That's if in the Smallville universe he doesn't know they're both the same. So I don't know that because I didn't read enough of the season 11 comics. But it is an interesting dynamic. It's a dynamic no one else has ever tried to do. And Smallville actually got away with it. You think about it, they took two characters from the comics. They did something very, very different. But the key thing is that Gotham Miller was still going to make Luthor the iconic megalomaniac he's always meant to become. But the difference here is he doesn't hate Clark. He loves him. He idolizes him. He sees a good person. And he never wants to bring that good person down. And the only reason he wants to get rid of him in the season 7 finale is because he sees him as a threat to the world. But even at that moment, and we've talked about this before, he's willing to stay in the fortress and die with Clark. And that tells you something about Lex. He will not allow him to die on his own because he means it. I love you like a brother, but it has to end this way. And I mean, it's just beautiful. So in this episode, Nemesis, you can just see Lex's frustrations coming out because he hasn't seen the side that we've seen. Clark's keeping secrets. Why don't you trust me enough? It's like what Lana always said to him. Why don't you trust me enough with your secret? And it's not about trust. With Lex, I'm sure Clark, at the back of his mind, has got Jonathan's voice in his head saying, don't trust him. As much as a friend of yours he is, and many of the good things, and he bought the farm back when we lost it, and he's done some wonderful things for us. But ultimately, the real Lex Luthor is going to click into gear, and we cannot trust him. And you, Clark, can't trust him with your secret. And ultimately, this is right. But have no doubts that the fleshing out of this relationship, there is friendship, there is love between these two guys, but ultimately there's a lack of trust. And this is how the Lex Luthor and Clark Kent friendship breaks down. but also ultimately this is the reason why Lana and Clark couldn't actually be together. So if you're a Lana fan and you're kind of angry that they didn't end up together, but they can't anyway, that's the fable, that's the legend. Clark and Lois end up together. But the whole point within the show, they gave good reasons. But ultimately, the reason why they couldn't be together is because Lana put on the kryptonite power suit on. But even before that, the darkness of got all the damage from losing her parents and everything she went through really affected Lana, and she knew she couldn't be with Clark. And you kind of see that in the episode Action, when she really knows that they can't be together. She doesn't want to hold him back. She tells him. And there's a kind of interesting theme with Clark and Lana and Clark and Lois, because Lois says that to him in the series finale as well. She says, I don't want to hold you down. And it's the whole thing with Lana as well, she says, maybe there's millions of people for you to save. And this is a brilliant moment when Clark turns around and says, there's not a million people in Smallville. And that's really emotional. That's what he's so loyal. He's an amazing hero. And so this is why I feel Nemesis is really, even though I haven't spoken an open amount about Nemesis, I keep on flipping from things to things, because the Clark and Lex dynamic is so fascinating. And it's not just kind of screwed in with Nemesis. Nemesis just shows you how they earned everything that they did. They were very patient. The fans were patient. It was an amazing show. It did so many amazing things. It's an unforgettable show that you can go back and watch again. I just loved the whole thing that they did. It was all about storytelling. It was all about character development, and everything was earned.